This salon talk is called Artist Legacy. I'd like to introduce some of our guests. Sandy Rower, president of the Calder Foundation. Welcome, Sandy. And Josh Baer, that you all may know from the Baer Faxt, and it was also an art advisor. So
is your microphone on?
I'll hand it over. It's on now, yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can anybody hear? Yes, it sounds like people can hear us. Wait a second for people to sort of move around. The subject tonight is the artist's legacy, and I'll let Sandy also introduce himself. But be curious, how many people in this room are artists? Can I have how many people are related to artists? Okay. How many people missed the Instagram talk and this is the best they could get? This is the second one. Okay, well, sorry. And I don't do Instagram. I'm sorry to those guys. I don't think I've heard of it. Sandy, do you do Instagram?
I don't.
Therefore, the difference in audience sizes.
I have plenty of friends. I don't need Instagram.
Okay. So we're gonna try to talk a little bit about what to do for and with an artist after they're gone. And Sandy, maybe I'll lead off with the question. You can sort of explain also how you came to this. I think there's a lot of confusion between the notions of a foundation for an artist, an estate of an artist, and what the legacy for or with an artist is. So maybe you can explain for your family how that works, and in general, the distinctions, and we'll sort of go from there.
Okay, well, when my grandfather died, it was 1976, November 11. He made no provision for any kind of legacy preservation. This concept now, this common concept now of having a foundation to protect the genius of an artist didn't really exist. There were a few European models where there was maybe a studio or a house or some sort of collection that was sponsored by the federal government, whichever country in Europe, but very, very few models for that. Now there are lots of models, and there are lots of artist foundations and lots of artist legacy foundations. One of the unusual things about our foundation is that it was not coming out of his will. It's not sponsored by the Calder estate. It's not something that Calder intended. It's something that I started in 1987. How many years is that? More years ago than I'd like to acknowledge. With the idea of creating an archive. That's really where it began. I felt it was really necessary for curators to be able to see what Calder made, when he made it, and what it related to in the rest of what he was making each year. So we have everything documented by year in all the different media, whether it's his jewelry, his drawings, his paintings, or the sculptures that are even more famous. So as a foundation and trying to create a model for ourselves, really just our own format, it began as an archive. And we kind of worked in secret for 5 years, building an archive, not answering any questions, not examining works of art, not dealing with authenticity or any of those other prickly questions until later. I wanted to have an amazing archive, a very rigorous archive, so that it was easier to go and do research and discover what's the proper understanding about not only the development of the artist, but also the history of each piece. So there you go.
Well, and to some degree, in an estate, you could almost argue is a for-profit organization, and a foundation is a not-for-profit organization.
Very much so.
And so they're at sort of counter purposes of how they exist by definition, almost, right?
Yeah.
Now, did you have any special professional preparation to do this?
No, none whatsoever.
That's why it's worked?
Yeah, I guess so. Estates are kind of misunderstood because most estates are not in business or are not for profit. They have a financial vehicle, which is the works of art, but they don't buy a lot of works of art and sell a lot of works of art. Most
but
estates.
They have a fund. The executor has a fiduciary responsibility to maximize the value of the estate in the most intelligent way. In that sense, there's an incentive to do their best for that. And a foundation could have a principle of taking all their assets, giving them all away over a short period of time with the sort of sunset provision, or do specific things that are not financially driven.
Well, both estates and foundations are open to all kinds of abuse. There have been so many stories, you've all read these stories recently of trustees or executors of estates who want $50 million paydays from an estate of a famous artist for doing 3 weeks of work. You know what I'm talking about. That is abusive. I think that's a terrible thing. I think all of that money should remain with the artist's legacy, and that money should go back into education, exhibitions, and publications about the artist. I think that's very, very critical.
Well, do you think that the explosion in the value of the art market over the last 5 or 10 years is a cause of it? In this case that has Florida repercussions, not wanting to talk about Captiva, the trustees argued that because of their skill, that from 2009 when the art market was this, to 2013 that they raised the value of that artist estate by 300% because they were geniuses, without saying, well, the art market has exploded. And that's what made it work.
My best explanation that I tell my friends about the art market explosion is Enron. That people who were investing in stocks, shares, bonds, all these other wonderful investments, when the CEO scandal happened, and people who were investors realized they were being built by directors of corporations, they went to find other ways to invest their money. And hundreds of billions of dollars came into the art market at that moment. I mean, it was a 10-year period. And that's why we're here where we are. I think that's the #1 reason that people look for another way to preserve their capital. And we were having a discussion before, not about artist estates, but I said to Josh, anybody, every single person who spends more than $20,000 to buy a work of art here at the fair is concerned about its future value. I don't mean that they're going to make $1 million on a $20 million purchase, but they want to make sure they can still get their $20,000 back. Well, he didn't agree with me.
I don't agree, but that's another set of topics. Your issue was interesting because you said your grandfather had no provisions. Do you think artists should just focus on their studio, make their work, try to have their control while they're alive, or should they, how formal should an artist be? My mother's a painter, she's in her 80s, so I'm thinking, what should she be doing and what have we done? What sort of advice would you give? Obviously, one solution doesn't fit all, but there's some general things that now with 25 years of experience, what artists should be doing?
Well, first of all, I'm sorry to say this. Children of artists are a mess. I mean, a total mess. It takes a grandchild of an artist to be able to separate out and be able to, no, literally what I mean is my mother, Calder's daughter, could not say, this is a great Calder and this is a genuine Calder, but it's a terrible Calder. She could never say that. She always said everything was great. And I can say, this is fantastic and this is horrible, but real. So it takes kind of you have to take a step away. If you're going to be this fiduciary, if you're going to have this responsibility as a curator or whatever it might be, you have to have a critical eye. You can't just think everything's fantastic. So you have a big problem. Your mom's alive, and you've got this legacy issue. You've got something you have to take care of. His mom's a great artist, and you're going to inherit a mess.
Well, I already do tell her what I think is better and worse, and that's why we don't speak so much anymore. So I've already gone too soon. I should just shut up and wait and do that afterwards. But is there something concrete that, generally when you talk about adult children with elderly parents who are going to die, they say, talk about it and discuss it. It's like, what do you really want in terms of things, rather than just, should that be written down, or should that be more fluid because the world changes?
It's a great question. You look at the Warhol Foundation. When Andy died, he left a provision for his entire estate to be made into a foundation to benefit art, not to benefit Warhol's legacy. And so when Joel Wax decided to stop doing art authentication because it's too expensive for the foundation with all the lawsuits and everything, he was actually really focusing the financial wisdom of the Warhol Foundation on what Andy intended, which was to give money away for exhibitions and publications and art endeavors, not just focusing on Andy.
So now there we're talking about a foundation.
Yeah.
rather than, so being clear between an estate. Now he gave money from the estate because he didn't have children to a foundation, but I think it's an important distinction. I look at it, many of the artist foundation, it's like, do they exist only to research, support, and the artists themselves? And personally, by the way, I think that that's, I'm not quite sure whether that should be a tax-free operation, because I'm not sure it's the same, or to support this other larger public good of the arts. So to be clear, most artist foundations only support the artist in their direct work. Is that?
Well, the tax code allows for that, so you're not in charge of that. But the Calder Foundation has a Young Artist Prize, a $50,000 cash prize.
Every 2 years?
Every 2 years. The Calder Foundation has an artist in residency program in France, and we sponsor other programming and so on. We have our own programming. We have these kind of very messy one-day events with 50 artists and so on in New York. We like young artists. We like the integration of Calder's originality and identifying it in present time. So understanding how in the 21st century there are issues that Calder was working on and developing in the 1930s and the 1940s that are present today and are very viable today when he was originating them.
So are you thinking, were he alive today, given your knowledge of his emotional, intellectual, political, social, personal thing, what would he have wanted to do? Do you ask yourself?
With the foundation?
With the foundation.
I had no idea about a foundation.
No, but now, do you think, what would my granddad have wanted?
No.
Not being able to predict, I can't know what the future is going to be like in 50 years. And those with artist estates, it's hard to know, but would he have been comfortable with those kind of things? You don't ask that question.
No, because the foundation is my concept. It was not his concept at all, which means that he hated to go backwards. I mean, in Calder's particular case, unlike Ellsworth Kelly or some other artists that go back and repaint their paintings from '64 because they want them to be fresh and lovely and perfect, my grandfather never wanted to go back. If he had a damaged work, he'd rather just scuttle it into the corner and make a fresh new work today, an entirely new work. He never wanted to go back, ever. And he's always looking forward.
And your attitude now about preservation and restoration is?
We are very, very fussy about the conservation and preservation of his work. There are museums we all know who take their big outdoor Calder sculptures and they take them apart with nuts and bolts. They throw the nuts and bolts away. They go and buy new nuts and bolts, not realizing that Calder had these nuts and bolts fabricated. They were his own aesthetic, his own choice. They're part of the sculpture. They're not a separate thing. They're not just a fastener. They're part of the sculpture. So we have this problem of sculptures without nuts and bolts. So we remanufacture now to his specification these nuts and bolts. We're very, very fussy about it. They have a C in the head for Calder. We're very concerned about conservation, extremely concerned.
And you do something interesting in your website. You're actually very concerned about fakes. Now, Calder made 18,000 works or something like that. It's like one a day for 50.
24,000. Yeah.
24,000, I guess, if you all the drawings and all that. That's
yeah.
How many of them do you know about?
24,000.
24,000. And how many are there in the world that people say there are Calders?
Less than 24,000.
I would think there's like 40,000 out there.
No.
People are saying are Calders and
I was visiting.
Aren't.
About 20 years ago. I was visiting the Matisse estate office in Paris, and they had this one wall of binders of all the Matisse drawings, and they had another wall of binders of all the fake Matisse drawings. They were one for one. They were, equivalent numbers of fake drawings they had documented in the years they had been running this office. There are thousands of fake Calders in our archives, but those are things that some kid made in school and brought home to his parents, and then 20 years later his parents pass away, it gets sold in a garage sale. These are not fakes, as it were, with the intention of defrauding anybody. But if somebody brings something to the foundation and we document it, and it's not by Calder, we document it as a fake. We don't want to call it anything else.
You put it on your website?
So on our website, what Josh is talking about is I felt it was really important to have a section of our website called misattributions. We don't call them fake, we call them misattributions. And that includes absolutely fake lithographs where the image depicted in the lithograph was not made by Calder, as opposed to fake lithographs which are copies of known images of Calder's work, if you see what I mean. So somebody would take an original lithograph and make 90 more of them just by taking a picture of it, making plates and printing them. And somebody else drew a fake Calder and then made lithographs. Those ones are particularly interesting because it's not Calder's image at all. Those we've posted on our website, an example of them. Then there are other things that are just confusing, like these mats that were made, supposed to be made in Guatemala and Nicaragua. And then the woman that was in charge of the project, it was to help this earthquake that happened in 1975, was it? It was earthquake relief. And the woman who was in charge of it took advantage and started numbering them as if they were fine art, which they weren't. They were supposed to be household mats to be used up and thrown away. So those are on our website, defining what they're supposed to be, what Calder's intention was, things like that. And there's a fake sculpture, this very ugly sort of elephant seal thing made out of metal, edition 999, totally illegally made by this company in Germany or maybe in France or both. That we posted because it caused so much confusion because there are 999 of them.
Well, the advice you can give certainly to the artist if they're interested in preserving your legacy, and the great thing about being an artist is there's a chance for a real eternal legacy of your art that outlives you, your child, your grandchildren, is to keep good records. So, you know, it may not every artist, it's their style, but keep good records. When you made it, now it's even easier digitally, keep it there, and then, by the way, back up that data and tell your kid where the data is, because it may not be so easy to find who owned it, and at least give somebody something to go from, rather than just stuff in a shoebox. So if you're not interested in preserving that and having confusion, then just let it go, and what comes to...
Warhol was amused by the confusion of authorship. So that's something the Warhol Foundation tried to deal with, is defining that confusion, but Andy allowed the confusion. I mean, it's a complicated issue. In terms of us, I mean, my grandfather left behind tremendous volume of paper, which we've classified, so you can go and see his correspondence with another artist or a curator or an event, an exhibition. We have tremendous exhibition files with photographs. We know what was in every exhibition, so virtually. You know, we have pictures of it, we have the catalog. Somebody tells us, oh, here's my Calder, it was in this show in Caracas in 1955. Well, it was or it wasn't, and we have tremendous records of that.
Well, so, and now digitally to make it exist online, I noticed recently there's now an online catalog raisonné of Cezanne just came out. Now I haven't, has anybody looked at that? Is it good? It's like, is that changing how things are going to be done? And it used to be that it would take 50 years to build this book, and the Wildensteins had to spend $2 million to build the catalog raisonné, and somehow, I guess, that gave them, just by accident, the opportunity to see every one of that work that suddenly they started trading in, that was used as a different resource. Will that change the game now, to have online catalog raisonnés, do you think?
Well, you always have fakes and fraud. So the purpose of the catalog raisonné is twofold. One, to educate curators about the development of a body of work, and two, to protect the legacy, right? But you would not believe the amount of fraud I've seen of what people do. They do the most amazing things. There was this forger who he would make little fake Calders, signed fake Calders, and sell them on his table in the flea market in New York on 26th Street. So smart New Yorkers would walk in and say, hey, how much for that thing on your table? And he'd say, I don't know, I hear it's important, I don't know what it is. He's the guy who made it. I don't know what it is, but I know it's important, it's $2,000. And so you negotiate $1,200 to buy this thing that was worth nothing. And he made a week's salary, and he was happy, and this, you know, these things went out in the world. He made so much money that he actually started buying real Calders. He bought this is amazing, he bought a Calder at Christie's, and a year later, with the actual invoice and the paperwork from the real Calder, he made a copy of it and presented it to Sotheby's with the original paperwork from Christie's. But he kept the real one and he tried to sell the fake. We stopped him, of course, because we recognize it as a copy of the original. But people do the damnedest things. So even if you have a catalog with an A, and even if it's accessible, and even if it's digital and all those things, it doesn't really, you know, it's
But
not the ultimate
somebody else
solution.
tried that with another artwork, I remember, and they gave the certificate with it. But what the problem was that the owner of the real one, so a guy buys a real one, sells it, then makes a fake one, but he's got this copy of it, so Sotheby's put in their catalog. The problem was at the same time, Christie's had the original. So suddenly now we've got two of them in the same, you know, one day after another, and the guy got caught. It was like, so you...
We don't do authentication, we do examination of works of art. And
the difference being?
yes.
Yes.
So with examination, a few months ago, there was a Calder painting came in the door from a dealer, and another Calder painting came in the door that was the same painting. One was fake. Just by total coincidence, they came the same day. That was kind of, you know, these things happen. It's kind of astonishing. But the foundation is really not in this, you know, protecting the global marketplace business. This is a secondary effect. We do examination because we want to study the work. We want to document and study the work. We're fascinated by the work. I have 17 employees, and all of them, including the two in the front row here, are fascinated. They work at the foundation because they choose to work there. We pay them nothing, and they're happy to work there because they love the body of work. The primary goal of the foundation is educating, what is this guy doing? Because this is not pieces of metal painted in form, moving in space. That is not Calder's work. It seems like it's Calder's work, but it has nothing to do with Calder's work. Calder's work is an exploration of the essential nature of all things. Now that doesn't make any sense. That's totally different than colored forms moving in space in poetic, you know, motion. Calder was exploring unseen forces. So gravity is an unseen force. Wind is an unseen force. We can perceive them, but we don't know exactly what they are. I mean, you can scientifically equate some of them. The fact that photons, that light has an effect on the motion of mobiles is something that Calder understood. So the environment, humidity, obviously human interaction, but humidity, photons, environment, are key factors in how a mobile performs or interacts with you or occupies space with you. That's really the mission of the foundation.
Now, it's not exactly to this point about the legacy, but has anybody ever heard anybody say this sentence like, Calder, no, I don't like Calder? Has that sentence ever been, I've never heard anybody say that. I mean...
Oh, tons of people say that.
Really? I've never heard anybody say that. In a way, I like to, it's facetious, it's kind of like, you ever hear anybody say, I don't like pizza? Everybody loves Calder. Everybody, whether they're...
I don't like pizza, I love pizza. But Peter Marino, who's celebrated this week, he doesn't like Calder.
He's actually said it?
He's bought a few Calders for his clients, for their homes and whatever, but he's told a few great Calder lovers, oh, don't buy that, you know, don't buy Calder, buy this other thing, buy whatever. So he's a person out there saying he doesn't like Calder.
Wow. I've never heard the sentence uttered, so it's and because of what you're saying about that it's not just, there's something more to it than these little pieces of metal floating around like that. And that has everybody sophisticated or less sophisticated.
Well, it's really challenging work, and that's what probably most of you don't even realize how challenging Calder's work is. But when he became abstract in October of 1930 and made his first 19 abstract paintings, and then started making abstract wire sculptures, they were about interaction of form in space, with definition of space as being permeable matter. So I know that, okay, so I've lost most of you probably, but what I'm saying is there are forces at work that Calder was exploring that now physicists are calling string theory. What is that energy that binds everything together? That's what Calder was working on. So from 1930 to 1934, he worked on volumes, vectors, densities. These are his titles of works. By 1934, nobody had a clue what he was talking about. So critics realized, oh, these are the universe, the sun, the moon, the patterns of bodies in space. And they started calling these works universes. That is not what they are. They include the universe and all universes, but they're not about the sun and the moon. The spheres in Calder are not representations of spheres in our universe.
But things that are something are much more interesting than things that are about something in art. Things that are obsessive are much more interesting than things that are about obsession. Things that are decadent are much more interesting than things that are about decadence in art. And in a certain way, you're saying things that are universal are more interesting things than are about the universe.
Well, that's exactly the point. And that's the basic mission of the foundation, is the universal versus this dumbed down definition, the universe.
But, okay, so let's back it out again. Do you think there's 3 million artists in America, okay? Do we need to protect all 3 million legacies?
I don't.
Do you think it's the responsibility of every artist family to do that?
No, I don't make judgments about other people's responsibility. I mean,
but try to give us some help to, outside of your...
I think you're right what you said before, that artists should keep track of their own work. Even if it means taking a snapshot of it and writing down a date and a definition or something. Even if you don't say where it was sold and where it was shown and who bought it and all that stuff, it's good to have a record. It's very good to have a record. It's very helpful.
Now, is there an organization or group of artist foundations, a formal one?
There's a secret society.
Don't tell anybody.
Of artist foundations in America. We're an informal group. We're not incorporated. We don't pay dues. We don't lobby. We don't do all these things. We get together. We have meetings once or twice a year and talk about the issues that we have. Authentication is one of them because of all the lawsuits and all the costs involved with protecting your opinion of authentication. But there are lots of other things. I mean, people ask me all the time, oh, you did a show, in a certain museum. How was that experience? How was the curator? How was the director? What was how did you negotiate the insurance issue? Things like that. So we share that information amongst ourselves.
Now, there was an estate projects for artists who died of AIDS, I believe, where they would give nonprofit legal tax help to those artists and their families. I don't know if that's still, if there's a larger, do you know about that?
No, I never heard of that. No.
And I don't know if there's a larger body that's saying, listen, you may not have the resources to do all you want because a lot of time, effort, professional help, but I believe there are organizations that will help artists' families and deal with that, or an artist to try to say, how are we going to do this? We don't even have storage. How do you keep these things? Where do they go? Should things, if you can't afford to keep them, should you? Somebody's got to pay for this warehouse full of stuff. There's a lot of really grassroots problems for, I'm not going to say starving artists, but not artists that were able to leave a structure, a financial structure, to pay 17 people.
I created the structure to pay the 17 people. So that's another, I'm very devoted to what I do. I'm criticized for what I do too, because I'm sort of absolute, which is, people don't like that. But my brother, who's sitting here, he's a painter, he's a sculptor. He's got this problem. He's a very prolific artist. He's got 3 dealers who sell his work. He's very successful, but he produces a lot more than he sells. So he's warehousing thousands of works that he's produced in his lifetime. His daughters, I criticize him because his daughters are going to inherit this body in a warehouse somewhere, and what are they going to do? I said, you have to be responsible. You have to take care of this in advance of your death, whenever that might be, decades from now. But you can't leave the responsibility to your daughter that you didn't take responsibility for. I think that's very, very important. So, you have an association with your mom, and you have ideas about what you're going to do in the future. And, we talked about this a little bit.
Well, my mom forgets what we in fact did, just that because I'm in the art world and the art business, it's logical to think I might be able to handle it. But my mom is concerned that, what if I die? And so it's like, well, I have my wife, she'll have it. And what in fact we created was a third party who will be in charge of the artistic decisions on behalf of my wife in case I'm not there. And he was a curator at the Menil and at the Guggenheim, and to be able to do that, not just so that my mom would feel comfortable that someone who knew the art world would be deciding which country could have this or that. So to give them something, but in fact my wife will be able to make all those decisions, but to give something that's comforting in a third party, an independent party, to say, I will speak for that world in a critical way.
Well, it's a real challenge because artists believe that their best friend who's an artist will take care of their legacy when they're gone. And then, unfortunately, sometimes artists make a deal to sell off a whole bunch of your paintings so that the artist can get a show in the gallery that's buying all the paintings.
My mom's will, which she hadn't changed in 40 years, named people she hadn't spoken to in 35 as being in charge of her art career. Now, I was a kid when she wrote them, so she needed that. But I said, you know, I have been in this business 35 years. Maybe I'm more capable of people you haven't spoken to in 35 years. But we'll open up for some questions, maybe, if anybody. I think there's a mic if. Oh, you either speak loudly or go for the mic.
Is there a question?
Yes, there's a question.
Oh.
Hi, hello. Was it easy to figure out that painting was fake, or those two paintings were fake, or how did you figure it out?
It was super easy because the original painting was actually coming out of the estate previously. We knew its size. It came out of Calder's studio, and the fake painting was the wrong size. The fake painting was made out of a book, so somebody, not only the height and the width were the wrong size, but dimensionally the ratio was not correct, because in the book it had been cropped a little bit. So they copied it right out of a book. The paints were wrong, the canvas was wrong, the canvas was new, it was made probably 10 years old, something like that. It was very, very easy to, we didn't need the real painting to determine that the other painting wasn't by Calder. But it was just, the interesting thing was that they both appeared at the same time. Strange things happen at our foundation a lot. I mean, the appearance of things happen. It's just bizarre occurrences. I don't know if
you don't write on the back the one you returned fake.
No.
Or misattributed?
Misattributed to Calder? No, we don't. We document it and we make a file for it. Sometimes we'll see a piece which is not by Calder and it's in the marketplace and we tell the owner it's not real. And he says, okay, thanks. I bought it at a flea market for $5. It's no big deal. And then 2 years later we see it on eBay as a work by Calder. And then we kick it off eBay because we hold the rights for Calder on eBay. We police eBay and try and kick all the fake stuff off. And then 2 years later, we'll see it again in the marketplace with a provenance gift of the artist to the current owner in 1956. Totally fictional, totally made up. You know, the life of these things go on. We're not allowed to seize and destroy works of art, fake works of art in America.
But some foundations or authentication committees make it as part of your application process that they are allowed to write fake on it if they decide that. And that's a pretty onerous.
We've chosen not to do that. We also don't make photo certification, so we don't take a photograph and write on the back an original work by Calder with the date we saw it or anything like that, because the photo certificates are faked, or somebody will take a real photo certificate and apply it with a fake sculpt. All these abuses happen.
Well, and parenthetically, since you mentioned eBay, hi, my team, I happen to be consultant for eBay, so I happen to be, we're actively involved in trying, both you on your own and we as a company, as we're developing our online art platform that you'll see more and more about, is try to figure out how to police the art market and take fakes out. But the problem of asking people showing certificates of authenticity is those can be faked. And the more information you show what real ones look like, the more opportunity you give to somebody else to say, oh, that's what they look like, I'll make one. So the lack of one can be, it's not enough that those things don't exist to make them not real. Having them can actually be problematic.
So again, part of legacy preservation for us is to make clear what Calder made and what he didn't make. So I don't know. We've been kicking stuff off eBay for at least a dozen years, maybe longer. How old is eBay?
20 years?
Something like that. We registered with eBay a long, long time ago. We've kicked off literally thousands of things off eBay. Unlicensed products, things that cause confusion, things that use Calder's name to draw your attention to the product or the thing, but it's not a Calder thing. They abuse the name of Calder. We kick all that stuff off eBay. We try to kick it all off. We did it as an experiment in the beginning.
But the really good ones that are real, that are too cheap, you buy those.
There's a lot of people that try and buy those. Sometimes we buy things which are also fake because we don't know what it is, and we actually buy them. We tried to buy a painting last year. We didn't know what it was. We didn't kick it off. We thought it was weird. We started to bid on it, then we stopped because we realized we just didn't know what it was. It sold for $5,000 or $6,000. Then it came to us for examination, totally fake. It was an old painting of a street scene in Europe that somebody had painted an early-looking Calder signature on, but the canvas was from Holland. It was a Dutch canvas that somebody had purchased in a flea market and put this fake Calder signature on. We were able to figure out what it was when we had it, physically in front of us.
Another question? Hang on so we get the mic, please.
Have any idea how Calder would have felt about somebody blowing on one of his mobiles to make it move better?
I can't hear what's
The question, how did he feel about people breathing and blowing to get them to move? Was that your question?
Yeah, blowing. Blowing.
Blowing?
So if you buy it, you can blow on it. It's all yours. The thing about now, Calder, the highest price for a Calder sculpture is $35 million. So the person who paid $35 million for a mobile, and he doesn't want you spitting on it. It's as simple as that. So it's an awkward thing when we just closed a show at LACMA in California. That was a beautiful. It was only 48 sculptures. The installation was designed by Frank Gehry, which at first I was nervous about that, but Frank did an amazing job. It was a spectacular show. And we got all this hate mail, as we always do. Why did you tell the guards we can't blow on the sculptures as Calder intended? And the answer is, well, we didn't tell the guards anything. It's the museum policy that you can't alter somebody's property. So you can imagine, we also suggest that museums don't hand out pamphlets at the entrance of an exhibition. I've seen so many things. Crunch them up in a ball and throw them at the mobile to make it move, make it perform for me. Another misconception is that the mobile is supposed to move all the time. They're not supposed to move all the time. The most magic in a mobile is when you look at it, it's quite static. You look away, it moves. You look back, it's moved and it's static again. It's a magical thing if you've ever had that experience where it's not just spinning around. This is not Calder's intent that they just spin around. You have to slow yourself down. You have to be present to it. But the works were made, almost every work, except this giant piece for Heli Namad's booth over here, was made for domestic use. It was supposed to be in a house. And it was supposed to have,
Well, you have to watch your bag. I was in Pace yesterday, and I was standing next to the
standing mobile there, yeah.
And a lady knocked it over on the ground, and I'm like, it wasn't me. And she was like, she wanted to die. And Mark Limcher came over, and he picked it up off the floor and he put it back together. But this was a panic moment and a loud moment just yesterday.
I bet it was noisy.
And I told her that she would get a much better discount if she bought it before she broke it. But my humor was not well received. But you will get a better price if you buy it before you blow on it. And
your question is a very serious and an honorable question. It's a difficult. There's no perfect solution to the question. Museums have the responsibility to protect their collection and protect the works that they borrowed, and owners don't want you, damaging or potentially damaging their works. So
we all want to touch sculpture. It's so physical. It's like your hand just goes for it every time, and if you touch that Donald Judd, it's a problem. If you touch something else, it's not. And it's a risky proposition.
Our contract, the foundation's contract, when we loan works to museum exhibitions, it specifically stipulates that there has to be a guard in each and every separate gallery where our works are displayed. Not a roving guard, not a guard who stands in the doorway between two rooms and looks both ways. Because Calder's work is exceptional, everybody wants to engage it because of this idea that Calder intended that he wanted you to activate it and be present to it. So it's necessary for the preservation that we have to have.
I wanted to go back to something you mentioned, but to ask you about the origins of having the Artist in Residence program in France, which I know has been incredibly successful and important to many artists in their career. So I think that whole part of your vision of the foundation, I think is wonderful and should be talked about a little bit more.
Well, the residency program actually came out of, I started the foundation in New York, and separately the foundation in France was started. It was my mother and her sister, my aunt, the two Calder children, had this problem. They had this giant studio in this house in France that was empty, and what do you do with it? And they, with my grandfather's friend and lawyer Stanley Cohen, they went to the Ministry of Culture and said, can we reactivate the studio in some fashion? And then the Minister of Culture, Dominique Bozo, decided to use state funding to get this program, get it started, and it was a really, really good program. It's been 25 years now. We do it 3 artists a year for 3 months each, single artist at a time. They get funding, they get an assistant. It's in rural France. It's been really great, and its association to Calder's legacy is very, very important to us. And then the Calder Prize is something else. It's something we give in Venice every 2 years. Our last prize winner was Darren Bader. Probably a few of you know who Darren Bader is. There's a piece here in Andrew Kreps's booth. Go see Andrew Kreps, and you'll see this weird mishmash of stuff. It's hard to access. The first piece of Darren Bader I saw really pissed me off. It really pissed me off, and so I bought it. It was very difficult work. But the engagement with Calder's legacy is something that's, in all these different aspects, whether it's policing on eBay or honoring young artists, it's all part of what we do.
Another question here. Hang on so everybody can.
Thank you for sharing your idea. And back to your mention, I have a question regarding bolt and nut in conservation issue-wise. You mentioned Calder choose as like an object, even industrial bolt and nut, right? That's correct?
Yes.
My understanding, yes.
He was very precise about the nuts and bolts in his sculptures, so much so that in the second half of his career, he had manufactured his own nuts and bolts to the aesthetic that he wanted.
Yes, thanks. What about repaint? You, as far as I know, Calder Foundation allowed to repaint every individual collector. So that's my understanding. So I'd like to ask why you...
I'm glad you asked that, because it's absolutely not correct. What's correct is that virtually, and there are exceptions, virtually every outdoor sculpture has a technical finish. It wasn't painted by Calder's hand with a brush. It has a technical finish that has a technical color and a technical reflectivity. So if you leave a red sculpture out in the sun, in direct sunlight for 5 years, it becomes pink. And you have to renew the surface so it's back to Calder's intended red or black or whatever the color might be. We very much are eager to provide advice about Calder's intent for how the sculpture should be presented. We are not in agreement with repainting sculptures that have Calder's hand involved with the surface. Absolutely not. We believe that that should be treated like a painted surface, like a painting, like a Rothko. You don't repaint a Rothko, you shouldn't repaint the Calder. His brush stroke, his hand in the sculpture, is a very, very exciting and key ingredient. You can see the movement of his hand incorporated into the movement of the sculpture. So I invite anybody who's interested in the conservation question with a specific work, always be in touch with us. We don't make any kind of bland statement, yes, repaint, don't repaint. Like, what's the sculpture? Send us pictures. We want to know what the condition is. We want to give advice.
Thank you. Sorry, let me ask you one more question. Yes.
Twofer.
What about, do you have an idea for artist resale right? Could you share your idea for that?
What was the question?
She's asking about my opinion of artist resale right. And for those two of you in the audience that don't know what she's asking about, it's the question that when a work of art is sold, primarily the artist gets paid, and then when it gets sold on the secondary market or sold third and fourth and fifth time, shouldn't the artist receive a percentage of the increase of value, of the sale, a royalty essentially? When musicians' music is played on the radio, they get paid. Every single time it's played on the radio, they get paid. And the suggestion is every single time a work of art is sold, the artist should get a residual right, a residual royalty. It's a very complicated question. It's sort of, in a way, it's kind of almost an anti-American. The old school idea was it's anti-American,
Capitalism.
What? Anti-capitalist kind of concept. I've come around to liking the idea, since you're asking my personal opinion. The Calder Foundation, which owns Calder's rights, would benefit, and that money would go into programming, and I think that's very good. It's complicated because the artists who sell for tens of millions of dollars probably don't need to receive that resale royalty, and artists who are less famous, who, when a painting is sold the third time and it's $100,000, it might be nice to receive a check for a few $1,000s for that artist.
But the artists that you're hoping to serve, those 3 million artists, won't ever get anything.
No.
And it may discourage people from buying younger or lesser known artists if you have to then be involved in the administration of paying these royalties.
Well, in a broad stroke, I believe that the artist rights administrators are the ones who will make significant money from administering these rights, and the people who, people that should get $1,000 or $2,000 or $6,000 a year and could really use that money are going to get very little of it. But it's a complicated issue.
Yeah, but Josh, also, what about the point that if a collector buys a work of art by an artist and the art goes down in value over the next 10 or 20 years, does the artist have to give money back to the? I mean, it goes both ways.
Yeah, I'd like, if I lose, do they pay me back? I'm opposed to it as maybe if I was a grandson of a.
I'm generally in favor of it. So you have both points of view. But can I just add that much more importantly is copyright. So copyright provides an income stream to artists. It's a residual right, or to artist foundations if they own the rights. But the much more extremely important issue for the copyright, for holding copyrights, is that you get to protect the artist's legacy again. Some people don't like it. I think it's a fantastic vehicle. It's what allows us to kick the fake stuff off eBay very easily.
Yeah, and it preserves the intellectual content for the future of keeping it off coffee cups and T-shirts or whatever, and I'm all for that, I think. And when you buy work of art, you don't get the copyright when you own it, except in rare cases where museums ask for it. But just when you're talking about, the legacy, I don't want to put you on the spot with specific cases in your opinion, but it's interesting now because we have issues about posthumous casts, where they intended to be made posthumous. We have the issues of things that are made, famous minimalist artists who use fluorescent tubes. Do we need to keep those tubes? And then that family has a disagreement. The artist said, never make anything after I'm dead. And the kid said, well, you know what? We're going to make them anyways. And that those are real problems that the art market is facing with major important artists of how to preserve these things, particularly in sculpture, more than painting. It's how do we remake it? How do we keep those materials? How do we judge how important it was for the artist himself to make that photo print or that cast? And I think you would agree that every case is a different one.
It is, and we're lucky in that Calder was extremely devoted to making unique sculptures. So we don't have this issue of, oh, he cast 4 of them you know, 4 of 6 was cast when he died, and let's cast 5 of 6 and 6 of 6 in editions, because we don't have editions. We do, strangely, because we own the right and the moral right, it means that we could decide, you know, the sculpture at Heli Namad's booth, let's make 6 more of them. But let's not, you know, let's not spoil the image of the original. Let's make 6 more that are 5 times bigger.
Or 1 inch, is 1 inch big enough to be different?
Or 1 inch, and then put the foundation stamp on it, and there's a market for that, certainly. But we think that's a terrible, terrible thing to do.
One last question, because I know we've run over, if there is.
My question is, does it benefit an artist who's a prolific artist, or because I've had so many people give me different opinions, like if you're a prolific artist, you produce a lot of art, it actually hurts you as an artist, versus in some other...
I mean, like Picasso, Warhol,
well,
Calder, Richter,
and
Basquiat.
that's been my argument, but I hear that from from gallery owners saying, well, we don't want artists to produce a lot of work because we want to limit the amount of pieces that we sell on the market.
I mean, they want to sell less art? The dealers are saying?
It's a great question
Yes.
for Gerhard Richter, because Gerhard Richter is a really prolific artist. He's also a tremendous cataloger of his work, and he's also amazing at destroying ineffective works. He's destroyed lots and lots of paintings in his lifetime because they didn't function, they didn't work. His squeegee paintings, he's destroyed lots of them. He doesn't even document them.
There is a great website called gerhard-richter.com with great virtually catalog resume, but it's not made by him, it's made by a collector. I don't know if you knew that.
His website is made by a collector?
Gerhard-richter.com, which is a great resource.
I thought that was his website.
No. But, you know, if I often say if Vermeer were alive today, his dealer would say, you know, it's Art Basel Miami. What do you mean you only made 2 paintings in the last 4 years? I need 2. And there's also, you know, Art Singapore coming up, and his dealer in Stuttgart, and Vermeer would have no career because people are saying, you know, hey, you know, I need more product, man. And so it's like counterintuitive.
He would have hired more studio assistants.
No. So it's, each case is a different example.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you for coming.